Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. I want to talk to you about freedom of speech and how the US is embarking on this pretty insane full frontal assault on freedom of speech at the same time as they are attacking places like Europe for their constraints on freedom of speech as the Americans see it. There's just an incredible level of rank hypocrisy going on, particularly with people like JD Vance. Marco Rubio can also take a bow too. Let's remind ourselves of a few things JD Vance has said about European freedom of speech issues.
Yes, the Europeans annoy me sometimes, and yes, I disagree with them on certain issues, but we have to remember that is the cradle of Western civilization. The entire idea of Christian civilization that led to the founding of the United States of America, that was formed in Europe. Oof. Europe is at risk, I think, of engaging in civilizational suicide.
And by the way, that's a really poor understanding of the founding fathers. Avowedly deistic, but not they were wanting to move away from the idea that they are a Christian country, and that's why you have the separation of church and state and so on and so forth.
You see them starting to limit the free speech of their own citizens. If you have a country like Germany, where you have another few million immigrants come in from countries that are totally culturally incompatible with Germany, then it doesn't matter what I think about Europe. Germany will have killed itself, and I hope they don't do that because I love Germany and I want Germany to thrive. If you have a country like Germany, where you suicide, you see them starting to limit the free speech of their own citizens.
So starting to limit the free speech of our own citizens. Here he was at a Munich Security Conference where he came over and said, Russia's not the enemy, it's freedom of speech and your attack on these freedoms, etc., etc.
In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat.
Okay, so he thinks free speech is in retreat. It's worth knowing as well that the US State Department will soon establish a new Office of Natural Rights tasked with monitoring so-called free speech backsliding. This is what Pekka Kallioniemi says in Europe and criticising what it views as censorship. The office may also impose visa restrictions on European officials who criticise US citizens online. What remains unclear is how this new office will handle JD Vance memes. So we're going to come to that in a second. But just to let you know that this is apparently something that's going to happen. So Marco Rubio has been laying out a detailed plan to restructure the State Department to focus on Trump's top priorities, part of which will be this one office, the Office of Natural Rights. Quote, will ground the department's values-based diplomacy in traditional Western conceptions of core freedoms and advance the department's affirmative vision of civil liberties. For example, the office will build the foundation for criticisms of free speech backsliding in Europe and other developed nations, it states, noting it will be staffed from the Bureau's eliminated European and Asian offices, as well as its policy planning and public diplomacy office. Absolutely incredible. So there will be a formal attack on what the Trump administration seems to think is this backsliding concerning freedom of speech. Now, the staggering levels of hypocrisy here are just, it's almost unfathomable that they can be so blatant in their hypocrisy. Now, the journal here from Ireland reports the US Embassy wants every social media username of the past 5 years on new visa applications. The move has been heavily criticised by the Taoiseach, who described it as excessive. The US Embassy in Dublin is tightening its visa requirements, saying that future applicants looking to visit the country would be required to divulge, quote, all social media usernames or handles of every platform they have used from the last 5 years on their visa application form. The embassy also said it wants people to set their social media profiles to public, reiterating a move announced last week by the US State Department. Reacting to the announcement, Taoiseach Michael Martin said the measures were excessive. I don't approve them. I don't agree with them, he told reporters in Dublin this afternoon. There's an issue around freedom of speech, but it's more the atmosphere that's created by these measures, the fear and the anxiety that young people will now experience travelling. National Students Body, formerly known as the Union of Students of Ireland, expressed concern over the heightened student visa vetting procedures, saying that the invasive scrutiny would create a climate of fear among students. You will not get a visa if, so the implication is, if you have insulted anything to do with the Trump administration, I presume, on social media. Absolutely incredible. And now Adam Kinzinger last night saying this is, all quotes, all caps, unacceptable and insane. What's he talking about? The US Embassy, London Consular, has said effective immediately, all individuals applying for an FM or J non-migrant visas are requested to adjust their privacy settings on all of their social media accounts to public to facilitate vetting necessary to establish their identity and admissibility to the United States under US law. Wow. Every visa adjudication is a national security decision. So if you have ever slagged off Trump or the United States of America, you are in jeopardy of not being allowed into the country. And it's not just the UK, and it's not just Ireland. Here we have the same situation in India. This is ridiculous. Backlash grows over US demand to unlock socials for visa. Planning to study in the United States? Things might have just gotten a bit more complicated. The US Embassy in India has issued new guidelines to tighten background checks for visa applicants under the updated directive. All applicants for FM and J category non-immigrant visas, including those applying for student and exchange programs, so it's not just students, by the way, it's everyone, are now required to make their social media profiles public. According to the embassy, this move is intended to assist US officials in verifying the identity and eligibility of applicants during the security screening process. And yeah, that same statement, it seems to be replicated all over the shop. So I think it's pretty universal. Interestingly, it's not the first time this has been touted by the Trump administration. They tried this back in 2017. So actually, no, this is 2025. So this is a BBC News article just coming out now. Concern over social media vetting for US student visas. Exactly the same reporting going on here. And just to give you a sense that there is widespread concern about this. But actually, this is something that has happened previously. If you look here, the Standard reported back in 2017, April 2017, that British visitors could be forced to hand over social media passwords to enter America. British tourists visiting the US could be forced to hand over their social media passwords as part of an extensive vetting program being considered by Donald Trump's administration. Travellers could be asked for their phone contacts and financial data under the proposals, part of the president's efforts to ramp up border security. Alongside Britain, they could affect 37 other countries, including France and Australia, it is claimed. If social media account passwords were handed over, officials would be able to access private messages alongside public posts. So Gene Hamilton, Senior Counselor for Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly, told the Wall Street Journal, quote, if there's any doubt about a person's intentions coming to the United States, they should have to overcome, really and truly prove to our satisfaction that they are coming for legitimate reasons. The plans could also see visa applicants quizzed on ideological issues, including whether they believe in the sanctity of life, a phrase used by US right-wingers in the abortion debate, and honour killings, the paper reported. So that clearly didn't happen in 2017, but they're trying it on again. This is an absolute assault on freedom of speech. Now, it's on the back of these such stories. So we have already heard of people being turned away at the border, an Australian, French, British, Canadian, all sorts of people getting turned away for varying reasons, many to do with freedom of speech issues, arguably. And this is the one that's been doing the rounds. Now, the authorities have come out and denied that this man was disallowed at the border because of having memes of JD Vance. But it's not clear that they're telling the truth there. And this has even been discussed in, say, Irish Parliament. So London Economic here, among many, saying tourists denied entry to US because of JD Vance meme on phone. I really didn't think that these innocent pictures would put a stop to my entry into the country. So a Norwegian tourist has claimed he was denied access to the US because a JD Vance meme was not found on his phone. Mads Mikkelsen, 21, told his hometown newspaper that he had been pressured into handing over his phone at Newark Airport, New Jersey, where he landed to visit friends in New York City. Mikkelsen said he had been subjected to, quote, abuse of power and harassment by officials who he claimed quizzed him about drug trafficking, terrorist plots, and right-wing extremism. He told Nordlis he was then taken to a holding cell, quote, with several armed guards, where I had to hand over my shoes, mobile phone, and backpack. Officials then apparently threatened to imprison him or fine him $5,000 if he did not grant them access to his phone. When he handed over his device, agents uncovered a meme that showed a digitally altered picture of JD Vance. The image, which is a viral meme, became a viral meme earlier this year after Zelensky's Oval Office visit, showed the vice president, chubbier, bald and cartoonish. Both pictures have been automatically saved on my camera from a chat app, but I really didn't think that these innocent pictures could put a stop to my entry into the country, Mikkelsen said. And that's the meme. The agents then said to have searched the Norwegian, taken his fingerprints and blood sample, despite Mikkelsen pleading with them that the photo was just a joke, and then he was not allowed into the country. Now, this has led to people saying, unbelievable, yes, Border Patrol demanding phone passwords, refusal means a $5,000 fine or 5 years in jail. This is a harsh reality for some travellers. Think twice before booking a US trip. Seriously, reconsider your travel plans. I actually know people who have cancelled going to the US this year because of border concerns. Now, the Daily Mail broke that story originally, but they've now changed it. This tourist who claimed he was banned entry to US because of the JD Vance meme on his phone was actually denied for a different reason, Homeland reveal. But although they reported it as you just saw the article, although it's from a different source, that one, Daily Mail reported it in the same way. They now say the US Customs and Border Protection, operating under the Department of Homeland Security, has since clarified that Mads Mikkelsen was not denied entry for any memes or political reasons. Okay. So they're just going on the Department of Homeland Security's assertion there. Time article actually has a little bit more detail. Norwegian tourist claimed the US denied him entry over a JD Vance meme. Authorities said it was his drug use. So, yeah, I guess we might never know really what the reason was. Tricia McLaughlin, a spokesperson for the Department of Homeland Security, which oversees ICE and Customs and Border Protection, CBP, called the claims of Mikkelsen's denied entry over the Vance meme false and BS. CBP said in a post on X, because of course everything gets done by Twitter, right, that Mads Mikkelsen was not denied entry for any memes or political reasons. It was for his admitted drug use. So who knows? But there is a bigger picture here that they are concerned. I mean, why would you be looking at his memes on social media? You know, what is going on here? This is deeply, deeply concerning. And just to give you some background, by the way, I freaking love the JD Vance meme thing. So this kind of, as you heard, took off earlier in the year, February onwards, when people started creating like enlarged cheek versions of JD Vance that then leave you to start wondering what JD Vance actually looks like, because you see so many of these memes that you think that's what he looks like. This cursed meme prevents you from entering the US. To lift the curse, post other JD Vance memes below. And you just, there are all sorts of different JD Vance memes. Some of them honestly just make me just laugh. I just can't help it. Could I be detained for this? But the question is serious. You know, if people are asking this is a deeply worrying state of affairs for the American nation. You know, you've even got NAFO patches to detail the crazy JD Vance memes. I love that. I just love that distorted embroidery as well. Absolutely brilliant. So, you know, this is now becoming a kind of resist thing. The bold JD Vance memes, because, you know, that's supposedly why he was not allowed into the United States, as a symbol of the resistance. But, you know, irrespective as to whether that, and by the way, you can go and find out why this meme, I guess, trend started, why weird JD Vance memes have taken over the internet. They are just delightful, absolutely delightful, all brilliant, brilliant. So there you go. That's JD Vance memes. But the broader problem is that there are very real concerns that the US is cracking down on freedom of speech while lecturing other people on freedom of speech. I mean, this is becoming such an issue that the picture there, as you can see, the bold JD Vance meme, is being discussed in Irish Parliament as they are, discussing the worries about these declarations by the US embassies concerning what they are demanding of people coming into the United States. It's deeply concerning, and you need to piece this together with an awful lot of other worrying phenomena, such as, and this is not unusual for Trump, he did this fully in his first tenure, but his attack on the free press is really disturbing, and it's getting worse. So he used to slag them off at his rallies, saying, here are the press at the back, and he gets everyone to boo them, which is putting a barrier up between yourself and the free press, and the free press is what holds you to account, what criticizes you when you do things wrong or dubiously or whatever. Just holding you to account is a basic fundamental principle and job of the free press. And if you are denigrating them on account of doing that, then you are stopping yourself being held to account. This is one way you get to dictatorship. This is how autocracy is nurtured. And he is doing it again, and he's doing it in really despicable manners. So the man-child president just called CNN reporter Natasha Bertrand to be thrown out like a dog. So this is what he's just said, and Joe Walsh here says, once again, I'll give you the biggest crybaby in all of human history. But actually, it's more serious than that. This is deeply worrying for those who believe that all leaders should be held to account. And this is as a result of the CNN reporting on the leaked DIA reports on the strikes in Iran and them being somewhat ineffective. Trump has gone to town on the media doing this. Natasha Bertrand should be fired from CNN. I watched her for 3 days doing fake news. She should be immediately reprimanded and then thrown out like a dog. She lied on the laptop from hell story, and now she lied on the nuclear site story, attempting to destroy our Patriots pilots by making them look bad when in fact they did a great job and hit pay dirt. Total obliteration. She should not be allowed to work at fake news CNN. It's people like her who destroy the reputation of a once great network. Her slant was so obviously negative. Besides, she doesn't have what it takes to be an on-camera respondent. Not even close. Fire Natasha. So Natasha Bertrand gets an absolute pasting from Donald Trump. To the point where, do you know what? Even Brazilian presidents coming out and criticizing Trump's online behavior, saying, be a president, not an influencer. Without naming Trump directly, Lula urged the leader of a major country like the US to spend less time online and act more like a head of state rather than shouting on social media. And I couldn't have put it better myself. We have to start worrying when there are assaults on social media. And, here you've got another example assaults on the media that are done through social media. But it's not just social media. Here he is on camera slagging off CNN and MSNBC that he calls MSDNC, saying that they are just in the pockets of the Democratic Party. If it ever plays. Okay, here's another one.
The fake news, like CNN in particular, they're trying to say, well, I agree that it was destroyed, but maybe not that destroyed. You know what they're doing? They're really hurting great pilots that put their lives in the line. CNN is scum, and so is MSDNC. They're all, and frankly, the networks aren't much better. It's all fake news, but they should not have done that.
Calling them scum. He's called them, I think, the enemy of the people previously, and these are disturbing trends that we're seeing, and it's also happening outside of the immediate orbit of Trump and his lackeys. We're seeing that actually Fox News is somewhat open to these ideas of coming down hard on critical media outlets. Here they are, Laura Ingraham is interviewing someone who is advocating for reporters to be brought in to give depositions concerning who their sources are. This is a really dangerous thing, by the way. If you start forcing journalists to give up their sources, then you are going to stop investigative journalism. You're going to stop journalists being able to get off the record remarks. You're going to get just a completely compliant electorate or administration. Yes, leaks are a problem, but you start forcing journalists to give up sources, you are going down the autocratic route yet again. And here we hear advocacy for this.
Well, you can already hear the media caterwauling about the Trump administration going after the First Amendment,
yes,
eviscerating
yes,
freedom of the press.
Yes.
This would require your bringing reporters in and getting depositions by reporters. There are 5 on that story, as you said. Are you prepared to do that?
Yes. I mean, of course. I mean, it's a criminal investigation. There's somebody within this government that is a top secret or maybe even higher level security clearance who felt it was okay to contact CNN and the New York Times and leak something that is not only highly sensitive, not only extraordinarily secret, but also not vetted, not accurate, and they knew that. And so do we need to investigate the person that did that? Yes.
Yeah, but what about the possibility?
And of course, I'd love to see just the end of that questioning, actually, because Laura Ingraham, to give her dues, might well have been going on to say, what about the possibility it was actually correct? And I think there's this almost incoherent approach from the Trump administration to say, look, in the case of the Iran strike leaks, that these were lies and it's not true. And this was an unvetted report, etc., etc., and it was leaked. It's trying to have your cake and eat it. It's a bit weird if someone's leaking lies. So one would assume the report is somewhat true for the person to be leaking it. And I think they're trying to have it both ways, that A, it was a lie, and B, it was leaked. But if we focus on the leak, then we can distract away from the fact that that report existed at all. And to focus on the leak, we then need to really start bringing in, as you heard there, 5 reporters to give them the once over to make sure we shake them out of their contacts. And it all looks rather Stasi-esque. And I'm very worried about that, to the point where, this has been a concern. So Europe and UK have been tightening up regulation, allowing journalists to not have to give their sources over. EU lawmakers adopt media freedom law in 2024. Greater protection for the media after journalists was fined, and this is Belgian journalists. So that then the Council of Europe stepped in there. Source protection and protection of journalistic materials. So media defence they know that this is an ongoing battle that they have. Journalists can't be forced to reveal their sources. That's 2020. Bill of Rights to make it harder to order journalists to reveal sources. That's from the UK. UK government wants to make it harder for courts to order journalists to disclose their sources in a proposed Bill of Rights. So these are issues that have long been, probably since this kind of journalism began. It's good to see here, in the case of Natasha Bertrand, that CNN really did come to her support here. She wasn't sort of hung out to dry like the producer of 60 Minutes. Here we stand 100% behind Natasha Bertrand's journalism, and specifically her and her colleagues' reporting of the early intelligence assessment of the US attack on Iran's nuclear facilities. CNN's reporting made clear that this was an initial finding that could change with additional intelligence. We have extensively covered President Trump's own deep skepticism about it. However, we do not believe it is reasonable to criticize CNN reporters for accurately reporting the existence of the assessment and accurately characterizing its findings, which are in the public interest. Absolutely in the public interest. And it was absolutely good and proper that Natasha Bertrand and CNN and other news outlets reported it in the way that they did. That's just normal reportage. But Trump is going after them because this is an attack on freedom of speech. It really is. And I think you might get to a point where you will start losing more and more supporters. We are already seeing that Trump's figures are the worst they've ever been for any president at this point in their presidency. He's dropped even further, I think, in the latest polls that I saw. I know he keeps talking about, say, Rasmussen polls that put him considerably higher than all the other polls. But you know that things are going badly in the polls when you're losing people like Candace Owens. This is Candace Owens on Piers Morgan, and this is quite incredible.
Are you done with Donald Trump, or could you see a way that you would end up perhaps voting for him? Oh, he can't run again, obviously, but would you support him publicly again?
So I want to be clear. I don't regret voting for Donald Trump above Kamala. I think he was the better candidate, certainly a better candidate above Joe Biden. But what I will say is that he's been a chronic disappointment. And I feel embarrassed that I told people to go vote for him because this wasn't going to happen and it is happening. But I just think that the picture of politics in America is going to look very differently because of his actions. So I don't know where we go from here. I really don't. But this is not the candidate that I voted for.
If you've lost Candace Owens, you're in a lot of trouble. And you've already got Joe Rogan sounding off. In fact, Joe Rogan, in perfect timing, interviewed Bernie Sanders just now. So Joe Rogan initially was a bit of a Bernie Sanders fan, that kind of populist but left-wing populist. Then he jumped on the culture wars bandwagon and became, or I don't know if he particularly became, but it brought out of him his inner like right-wing anti-woke tendencies. And then he really went deep in supporting Trump, Joe Rogan, and then took a lot of his followers with him to the point where everyone's saying we need a left-wing Joe Rogan, rather than saying we need people to appear on Joe Rogan's show and present their more positive narrative from the other side of the political spectrum so that you can bring him back or bring his audience along with you, as Bernie Sanders originally did when he was first interviewed on Joe Rogan. So Bernie Sanders has just been interviewed again because Joe Rogan has been sounding off about the treatment of immigrants in by ICE on the roads, on the streets where they've been like beaten, thrown in unmarked trucks, beaten by balaclava clad unidentified militia. You've had children and babies ripped from their parents and all sorts. So Joe Rogan's been sounding off about that. So you're losing Joe Rogan. You've lost Candace Owens here. It appears there are others as well worried about Iran. You've got Thomas Massey. You've got Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, Marjorie Taylor Greene. There are issues. Now, if these real stalwarts of the Trump administration or of Trump world are beginning to have doubts, then, or very publicly showing their doubts, then you can imagine there are an awful lot of other people in the general electorate who are feeling the same. So I can imagine that Trump's numbers at the moment are in a lot of trouble, and all the polls, well, most of the polls suggest that. But it's this further move towards autocracy whilst embracing rank hypocrisy. It's like freedom of speech in Europe is terrible. We're going to create an office to deal with the terrible freedom of speech issues in Europe at the same time as cracking down on freedom of speech right throughout the United States. Terrible times for the US. Just sort it out. What is going on? Anyway, that's enough from me. Take care. Speak to you soon.